الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Respected brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakumullah khair for attending tonight's seminar entitled Entrapment and Spying of the Muslim Community. Ever since 7/7, we have seen numerous laws passed by the British government which have created a climate of fear for the Muslim community. We have seen that many amongst us have sold their deen by becoming spies for the police and for the government. It is important, it's imperative for us as Muslim community to safeguard ourselves against the plans that are coming our way. And indeed, this is not a new phenomenon. If we go back to the life of the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the institutions, the government of that time, they enacted certain policies aimed at creating a similar sense of fear for the Muslims of that time. And what we see now and what we are witnessing is nothing new. We have seen numerous raids on Muslim households. Many Muslims have been arrested, and many still linger in the prisons of the UK without charge. And even in our own communities, the police, without any valid reason, have raided the homes and arrested brothers and sisters. They have visited our masajids, and some of our masajids have been forced to comply by having CCTV cameras installed for the purpose of spying on Muslims. And today we are honored and privileged to have with us Brother Moazzam Begg. Many of you will be familiar with Brother Moazzam Begg's face. He indeed was one of those British citizens held captive at Camp X-ray in Guantanamo. Just to give you a brief biography of Moazzam, born in Birmingham, I think 44 years ago, slightly older than me, 44 years ago, active in the Dawah. In 2001, moved by the plight of the Muslims in Afghanistan, he migrated with his family in order to undertake numerous charitable projects and provide basic education needs for the Muslims of Afghanistan. When the Allied attack started in October 2001, Moazzam was forced to move back to Pakistan with his family, and in January 2002 was seized by the Pakistani and American covert agents and subsequently handed over to the Americans, flown back to Afghanistan and subsequently onto Guantanamo Bay, where he was held for approximately 3 years without charge and released in January 2005 without charge. Upon his return and release to the UK, Moazzam has taken up the post of the director of a voluntary charitable organization, Caged Prisoners, working extensively to raise the awareness of Muslims, prisoners, whether in the UK or whether at Guantanamo Bay. He delivers numerous lectures, and we are honored to have him for the second time, I think within the last 6 months. He delivers numerous lectures, university campuses, masajids around the world, and he's also a regular writer, and he has a column or he writes for the Guardian paper. And he also has written the book that many brothers may have read, Enemy Combatants. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic over to Brother Moazzam to talk about not only his own experiences, but in particular, as how we as a Muslim community, what steps we should take in order to safeguard ourselves against the ever-increasing pressure that is being placed upon us by the British government. Brother Moazzam, inshallah, will speak for, I think, for about an hour, after which we'll open the floor for any questions or comments that you may have. For brothers who have difficulty understanding English, Brother Moazzam is fluent in the Arabic language, so any brothers who want to ask him a question in Arabic language, please, you can do so as well. Jazakumullah khair.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Allahumma la sahla illa ma ja'altuhu sahla wa anta taj'al al-hazna idha shi'ta sahla. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. First of all, it's a great honor to be able to come back to Derby, to be able to address the Muslims here. It's been over 6 months that I came here last. And I know this because for the last 6 months I've been in Syria, and the time that I spent there was mostly investigating one of the issues that people rarely talk about, and that is the involvement of the British and the American state in false imprisonment, torture, rendition and kidnapping. That although they often accuse the Muslim community and people from within this community of being involved in terrorism, I can tell you that kidnap is a form of terrorism. I can tell you that rendition is a form of terrorism. I can tell you that torture is a form of terrorism. I can tell you that murder is a form of terrorism. And our governments, the British government and the American government, and those who have been complicit with them, are evidently, quite categorically, undisputably guilty of all of the above. And I don't say this as somebody who is simply making claims without any proof or evidence. We have officials at the highest level, certainly former officials from the United States government and others, who agree with this statement that I have just made, who agree with the statement that I have just made. Amongst those, last year I met with the former Undersecretary for Homeland Security of the United States of America, somebody who's very close with Bush. And just 2 weeks ago, him and several former ambassadors of the United States to various countries issued a report on detainee treatment, in which they said it is indisputable that the United States government was involved in torturing subjects in Guantanamo, secret detention sites, and elsewhere. It is also true that the British government, past and present, have been responsible for and involved in acts of complicity in torture. And they have tried to introduce laws into this country that would attempt to prevent them being seen. So, for example, you must know, in the media in the past few weeks, you've heard about the Guantanamo hunger strikes, where several of the brothers there have consistently, for the past 3 months, been refusing to take food. One of those individuals is Shakir Amr al-Madani, somebody I consider a close friend of mine, who's originally from Saudi Arabia, but is somebody that I lived with in Afghanistan and here in the United Kingdom. His wife is British, his children are all British. The youngest son, Faris, he has never seen in his entire life. He's 11 years old. If he was to see his son in the street, he wouldn't recognize him. The father wouldn't know who the child was. The child wouldn't know who the father was. One of the things Shakir states as the reasons why he remains in Guantanamo, Shakir has never been charged with a crime. He has never been designated for trial by military commission, which is a kangaroo court. The standards of justice which are very low, so if they wanted to charge him, they could have done so very easily. They have not done that, but he remains there. One of the reasons why he remains there is because he states that when he was held in the Bagram detention facility, somewhere I was held also myself in 2002, his head was repeatedly smashed against the wall by Americans. That's not something unusual for the British government. What's frightening for them, what's scaring them, what's making them run for cover, is that British intelligence agents were physically present while that was happening, and they continued to question him. So this is the sort of behavior that British intelligence services and agents, the same ones who are involved in introducing the concepts of spying within our community, have tried to change the status in this country. Now, you have to remember, brothers and sisters, at the height of the campaign of the IRA, the height, there may be people here who remember the IRA and the campaign that they launched across Britain. They hit the MI5 building. They rocketed 10 Downing Street. They killed Lord Mountbatten, the Queen's cousin and the last Viceroy of India. They bombed right across Manchester, Enniskillen, and London, and Guildford, and all across the country. And as late as 1998, they carried out a bombing in Homa, which killed 28 people. But you didn't have the types of legislation and spying and laws that you have right now. You didn't have, for example, Schedule 7, which I'm sure almost everybody, if you've not been stopped under Schedule 7, you know somebody who has. And it affects the entire country, not just the Muslim community. So at that height of that campaign, when Britain really was under a state of terror, and if you ask the people in Northern Ireland, they say we were in a state of war with the British government. You didn't have those sorts of laws. You didn't have the introduction of a law that says glorification of terrorism, whereby somebody who writes poetry can get convicted of a crime. You didn't have an atmosphere that almost every single thing that is Irish at that time, today it's Muslim, is regarded as evil. From the dress code, from the way we speak, from the way we talk, from the way our women dress, from the way our masajid teach, from the way we slaughter our animals, from the way we travel, where our money goes, the way we have our marriage and divorce ceremonies, the way we apply the Sharia, the way we talk about defending Muslim lands from occupation. All of this stuff now has become scrutinized so badly that before we used to say in the past that we feel like the Jews of Europe before the pogroms and the Nazi Holocaust, but now we begin to seriously feel it. And that's an irony, because they say Muslims are anti-Semitic. That's a great irony, because everybody now begins to recognize what's going on. Now, the introduction of harassment in our community is something that's been going on for quite a while. The catalyst was, they say, September the 11th, but it was going on before that too. This was now an excuse. The racists of yesterday, the neo-Nazi skinheads of yesterday, who used to put on red laces and Doc Marten boots and skinheads, simply grew their hair, put on suits, and created political parties. Some of them did. And others carried their war to the streets, EDL and others, and tried from every angle to reshape the debate about immigration, about the biggest problem amongst the migrants, the immigrants, i.e. the Muslims, and what we need to do about it. And this isn't just happening here in the United Kingdom. It's happening in the United States, much worse. It's happening in Europe, and it's happening all across the globe. Even at a time when these revolutions are taking place, where these dictators who've been overthrown by the people and Islamic majorities have come across every time. And if you see, for example, in Syria, they talk about the rise of the Islamists. The only place in Syria that is free, the only places that are held by the quote-unquote rebels, where you can get justice, is the Sharia courts. And I include in that the secular Free Syrian Army. If you want justice in Syria, in the freed areas, the only place you can go to seek justice is the Sharia courts. Yet in Britain, The very mention of the name Sharia, the very concept of Sharia, means that you must be a radical. The very concept of you being connected to the idea of Sharia, of Islamic law, means that you must be a radical, that you must be a fundamentalist, you must be prone to committing acts of terrorism. And this is part of the problem that exists here in the United Kingdom. And part of that problem has been, of course, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَا تَلُومُونِي لُومُوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Don't blame me. Blame yourselves. We were weak and we continue to be weak in standing up for what we believe are our basic principles. We don't know how to articulate ourselves. We don't know how to present our argument. We don't know how to face our accuser. And it's easy to confine ourselves in our cloistered communities and say, well, there's nowhere to turn to, let's just stick all together and bury our heads in the sand. Well, someone's digging that sand. He's going to make you watch. He's going to pull your head out and make you watch. And you're going to be entirely and completely unable to do anything about it. So, of course, my dear brothers and sisters, what happens is that our Islamic institutions and elsewhere, instead of opening the debate and the discussion and challenging all of these people who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says about them, يُرِيدُونَ لِيُطْفِئُوا نُورَ اللَّهِ بِأَفْوَاهِهِمْ وَاللَّهُ مُتِمُّ نُورِهِ وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْكَافِرُونَ, that they wish to extinguish the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from their mouths, and Allah will protect His light, وَلَوْ كَرِهَ الْمُشْرِكُونَ, even if the pagans detest it. So what are they introducing into our communities? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا اجْتَنِبُوا كَثِيرًا مِنَ الظَّنِّ إِنَّ بَعْضَ الظَّنِّ إِثْمٌ. O you who believe, avoid suspicion. اجْتَنِبُوا كَثِيرًا مِنَ الظَّنِّ. Avoid much suspicion. إِنَّ بَعْضَ الظَّنِّ إِثْمٌ. Much of suspicion, or part of suspicion, is sinful. Part of suspicion is sinful. وَلَا تَجَسَّسُوا. وَلَا تَجَسَّسُوا. An order from Allah. Do not spy upon one another. Do not spy upon one another. Now, if you take any community, if you take any government or country, what are their laws in relation to spies? How do they deal with spies? How does the British government deal with spies, with Russian spies, for example? What do they do to them? You know the cases. They imprison them. It's a crime, treason, all sorts of statements they use against them. So spying is something that's not regarded well in any society. Yet they encourage it within ours. If somebody comes along and spies in Britain for the Russians or for any other country that's considered not a friend or a complete friend of the United Kingdom, and they are caught, the laws against spies are very strict. In the laws of war, a spy, still, they say, can be shot in the laws of war. So isn't it strange that MI5 will come along and ask you very, very clearly, without saying the word spy, because nobody likes the word spy, but just because you say change the word doesn't mean the reality of that act doesn't exist. They are asking you to do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, do not do. وَلَا تَجَسَّسُوا. And yet, there are Muslims who fall prey to this, who fall victim to this. They think, on the one hand, that what they're doing is something good, and on the other, they think they have no choice. They think that if MI5 comes knocking on the door, they are obliged to respond to them, they are obliged to respect them, they are obliged to answer all of their questions. Now this, in terms of Islam and in terms of the dunya, has one answer for it, one description. Jahl, ignorance. Ignorance of Islam and ignorance of the law in Britain. You are not required by law to speak to MI5. You can tell MI5 to go away as many times as you want to, and they have no right for you to answer their questions. They are not the police. They do not arrest people. They cannot lock you away. And anybody thinks that MI5 can do that doesn't know the law of this country. And anybody who says that and spreads this around is like the blind leading the blind. He is, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says of people, من حسن الإسلام المرء تركه ما لا يعني. From the best of Muslims, best of Islam is a man who abandons that which does not concern him. I.e., if he doesn't